What if I told you there are families who were handed $1 million legacy and still lost it? Not because the land wasn't there, not because the equipment wasn't there, not because grandpa and great grandpa didn't work hard enough, but because the wrong person was handed the keys. Because entitlement got mistaken for ability. Because no one vetted the successor. Because everyone assumed, well, they're family, so they'll figure it out. And let me tell you something, farming does not work that way. You can inherit the land, you can inherit the equipment, you can inherit the family name, but that does not make you an operator. And there is not a genie sitting in a bottle out by the fuel tanks waiting to pop out and save your legacy when bad management, bad spending, divorce, laziness, or entitlement catch up with you. So today, in honor of Be a Millionaire Day, we're not talking about how to become a millionaire. We're talking about how families lose $1 million farming operation and how to make dang sure it does not happen to yours. Welcome back to the Pathfinder Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Heidi Olson, and today we are going to take a little different spin on something that sounds fun on the calendar. May 20th is known as Be a Millionaire Day. Now, most people hear that and think, well, wouldn't that be nice? $1 million in the bank. No worries, no stress, no banker calling, no dealership notes, no family arguments over land, cattle, machinery, or who gets what. But today, I don't want to talk about how to be a millionaire. I want to talk about how to lose $1 million. More specifically, how to lose $1 million farming or ranching legacy that great grandpa, grandpa, mom, dad, and maybe even generations before them spent their entire lives building. Because here's the hard truth. A farm or ranch does not disappear overnight. It usually gets lost in one bad decision at a time. One entitled successor at a time, one unchecked spender at a time, one divorce at a time, one family member taking advantage of another one at a time, one will figure it out later at a time. And by the time everyone realizes what is happening, the land is listed, the machinery is sold, the cattle are gone, and the only thing left is a family story that starts with, yeah, we used to farm that. Over the last few episodes, I've talked a lot about vetting the best and most capable successor, not the most entitled one. And in episodes 41 through 43, during my interviews with the Odom and Ladner families, one message kept coming through loud and clear. No matter what, do not sell the land. Well, that sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? But simple does not mean easy, because keeping the land requires more than love for the land. It takes management, discipline, communication. It takes a plan. And it takes successors who understand that being handed keys to the farm does not magically make them an operator. There is not a genie sitting in a bottle out by the fuel tanks waiting to pop out and poof, save your legacy. You don't get 3 wishes in farming. You get weather, markets, debt, family dynamics, equipment repairs, taxes, landlords, and bankers, all the things that you need to operate your business. They're all the consequences. So today we're going to talk about how to lose $1 million in your family operation and legacy. And more importantly, how to make sure your family does not become the next cautionary tale. Let's start with this one. There are families who had everything in place to succeed. They had land, machinery, history, equity. They had opportunities other people would have just given anything for, and still they lost it all. Not because they weren't given enough, but because they were given too much without accountability. Because they were given too much without accountability. That is where so many legacy operations get into trouble. People just assume that if the next generation has the land, the equipment, and the last name, then everything will work out. No, it will not. Just because somebody was born into the operation does not mean they can run it. Just because someone can sit in the combine does not mean they understand cash flow. Just because someone can drive a pickup across the yard does not mean they can manage a cropping plan. Just because someone wants the title does not mean they can handle the responsibility that goes with that title. And just because a child, nephew, niece, or grandchild thinks they are entitled to the operation does not mean they are capable of protecting it. That is a difference between inheritance and stewardship. Inheritance says, this is mine because it's my birthright. I was born into it. Stewardship says, this was built before me, and I have a duty not to be the one who loses it. Those are two very different mindsets, and families better learn how to tell the difference before they turn over the keys. There was one situation where great-grandpa and grandpa had spent more than 100 years building a farming operation. 100 years. Think about that. That means they survived droughts, they survived bad markets, they survived years when the crop probably barely even paid the bills. They survived breakdowns, high interest rates of the 80s, low commodity prices, and everything else farming throws at a family in the season. Then the next generation had opportunities fall right into their lap that most farmers never even see. They had pipeline agreements, right-of-way easements, land sold for oil field commercial development, millions of dollars of non-farm income. Now, you would think, all right, that kind of money should secure the operation. Well, you would think it would pay down debt, build working capital, protect land, upgrade strategically, maybe create some breathing room for the next generation. But money does not fix poor management. Money only exposes it faster. At one point, this operation farmed over 10,000 acres, but instead of using that windfall to strengthen the farm, the spending started. Second homes in the South, expensive horses for a son to rodeo, all the gear, the bloomer trailers, the fancy diesel pickups, shiny new equipment. Now, listen, I'm not against nice things, and I'm not against horses or rodeo or a good pickup, but there is a difference between buying something because it serves the operation and buying something because you want to look like you are doing better than you actually are. There is a difference between investing and showing off. And here is the thing about talent. You cannot buy talent. You can buy the horse, the trailer, the saddle, the pickup, all the gear. You can buy the whole shiny setup, but you cannot rub the lantern and expect the genie to come out and make someone NFR material. The same thing is true in farming. You can buy the equipment, you can buy seed, acres, you can have your name on the side of the semi-truck, but that doesn't make you an operator. And while the spending was happening, basic management was not. The books were not being watched, the budget was not being followed, equipment maintenance was treated like an afterthought. Changing the oil mattered, maintaining the equipment, keeping track of the records, and knowing what you owe matters. Knowing what you can and cannot afford matters. You cannot run equipment until it quits. Trade it off, buy brand new, and then act surprised when the math finally catches up with you. And eventually, in this case, it did. The dealership notes got called, horses got sold, land started going up for sale. At 45 years old, part of the farm was being sold. Now, I don't know about you, but I would not want to be the one standing there explaining to great-grandpa and grandpa why the land they spent their entire lives building had to be sold because someone could not manage money. I've said it before and I will say it again. Don't sell the land. Because once that land is gone, the likelihood that it will ever come back is zero. The lesson here is not that money is bad. The lesson is that money without discipline is a dangerous item. $1 million windfall can either secure a legacy or speed up its destruction. It depends on who is holding the checkbook. Then there is this situation where a grandson was given land and equipment to continue the operation after dad retired. On paper, wow, that sounded great. Don't we all want that? Just hand over the keys to me and give me the land and the equipment. I get a chance to step into a farm. There's land, there's equipment, there's family history. But here's the problem. This grandson grew up in town. He only helped during harvest. He never truly was trained to run the operation. He never spent much time on the farm when he was younger. He did not know why behind the scenes decisions were being made. And that mattered because farming is not just planting something in the ground and hoping for the best. You have to know your fields, your soil testing, rotations, what's happening in the markets. You have to know when to push and when to back off. And if the next generation only knows how to show up when the combine is running, yeah, this is great. I can run combine too. If they only show up at the harvest, then they're not ready to manage the whole entire operation. Harvest is just the part everyone sees, but the operation is built in the decisions nobody posts on Facebook. The planning, budgeting, meetings with the banker, input decisions, land rent conversations with landlords, repairs, bookkeeping, all the late nights and sleepless nights, no rest, early mornings. All these are just the unglamorous parts. That's where the farm is either made or lost. In this situation, the grandson also rented land from his aunt. At first, maybe everybody thought, oh, he's family, it'll be fine. But then he stopped paying rent, not for 1 year, not for 2 years, but for years, consecutive years, he wasn't paying rent. And the aunt who was retired, she was on a fixed income, she had to ask another family member whether she should keep letting him farm her land, even though he had not paid rent in 4 years. Now, I'm going to say this straightforward. If you are retired on a fixed income and someone has not paid you rent in at least 4 years, and you still have to ask whether you should keep doing business with them, that's your sign. That is your sign that family and business need boundaries. That is your sign that being related does not mean someone gets to take advantage of you. That is your sign that keeping peace in the family can get very expensive. And that is where families get themselves into trouble. They let bad behavior continue because they do not want conflict. I don't want them to be mad at me. They avoid hard conversations because, well, Thanksgiving or graduation might be awkward. They let one person take advantage of another because, well, he's family. But family is not a business plan, people. Hope is not a lease agreement, and blood relation does not pay the rent. Eventually, this young man was no longer farming. The equipment was being sold. And here's the kicker. He was taking the profit on equipment that had been handed to him. Dad just handed him the equipment and he's selling it now for profit. That's what happens when there's no structure. That's what happens when the transfer plan is built on assumptions instead of accountability. Just because grandpa bought the equipment and land does not make the grandson an operator. It makes him someone who was given an opportunity. What he does with that opportunity tells you whether he is the right successor. Another situation involves a farm and ranch family where the son went off to law school. He married a woman who also had a successful career going. They came back to the farm and ranch to build a life and raise a family, like happily ever after, a fairy tale. On paper, that sounds like a dream. They had the education, they had the family, everything's looking great, a return to the land, a multi-generational opportunity. Kids were being raised in the country, but as we know, life gets messy. After about 20 years of marriage, the husband made choices that damaged the marriage. And now instead of talking about the next generation on the farm, they are in a battle over the farm itself. Not over little kids, because the kids are grown. They're all adults. This is a battle over the 12,000-acre farm. And one party does not want the farm in its current form. They want cash. That is where legacy gets dangerous, because land rich does not mean cash rich. A farm can be worth millions on paper and still not have millions sitting in a bank account. So when divorce enters the picture and one side wants liquid cash, what happens? Well, of course, land gets sold. The equipment gets sold. Livestock gets liquidated. The operation gets carved up. And while the fighting is happening, income can be lost. In this case, there was grain stored in bags in the field. That grain represented a lot of real money, millions of dollars in potential income. But instead of being turned into cash and managed properly, it sat. Wildlife got to enjoy what should have been income for the operation. Now, where does that stop? That is the question. Where does the battle stop when divorce comes into a family farm? Because it is not just two people separating, it can be the dismantling of something generations have built. And I know nobody gets married expecting to get a divorce. Nobody stands up at the altar on their wedding day thinking, someday we may be fighting over the farm. But that is exactly why planning matters. Not because you are hoping for failure, but because you are protecting the legacy from being destroyed if failure happens. Every farm and ranch family needs to have serious conversations about ownership, marital rights, operating roles, buyouts, trusts, entities, agreements, and what happens if a marriage breaks down. And no, that's not romantic. But neither is watching a 12,000-acre legacy get liquidated in a courtroom. You can love your spouse and still protect the operation. You could trust your family and still have agreements in writing. You can hope for the best and still plan for the worst. That is not being cold. That's being responsible. Then there is the ranch that had been in the family for 125 years. 125 years. That is not just land. That's a whole lot of history right there. That's where their ancestors were born, where cattle were raised, where the kids learned how to work, genetics were built over decades, where families gathered for holidays, and where memories were made, where somebody's great-great-grandma was born. This ranch raised registered Hereford and Black Angus cattle, years of genetics, years of selections in EPDs, years of work. The husband and wife had 4 children, but none of the kids came back to the ranch. And that is where a lot of families are sitting right now. The kids are grown. They've moved out. They have their careers. They have their own families. They've got life somewhere else. And mom and dad are still out there trying to figure out who is going to do the work. That's a hard reality of what's happening with today's farm families. Not every child wants the farm or ranch. Not every child is capable of running it. Not every child wants to live 50 miles from town or wants to do cattle chores in a blizzard. Not every child wants the stress or isolation, the debt, the uncertainty of the markets. And as much as that may hurt, you cannot build a succession plan around pretending they're coming back when they are not. That is where Plan B matters. This family did not have a real succession plan for what would happen if the kids did not return. So what was supposed to happen? Was the genie going to come out of the bottle and magically feed the cows? Was the work just going to get done because everyone hoped it would? Hope does not check the waters in the winter, does not pull calves. Hope does not fix fence. Hope does not manage a registered herd and do the paperwork. Hope does not preserve 125 years of family land. Eventually, the marriage became strained and divorce entered the picture. And the settlement involved selling registered herds that took years to build, selling land tied to family history, selling land for more than $4,000 an acre. And once that happens, you do not just lose acres, you lose the operation's future. There was fear that investors would buy it and turn it into a hunting reserve, taking more land out of production and changing the future of that neighborhood. And now the husband and wife have gone their separate ways. The ranch is gone, the cattle are gone. The Thanksgiving table is split in half. That is not just a divorce, that is a legacy fracture. And that is what happens when families do not plan beyond the assumption that one of the kids will come back. Well, maybe they will, but maybe they won't. Either way, you need a plan. So let's bring this back to Be a Millionaire Day. Because being a millionaire is not just about having $1 million run through your hands. Some people receive millions and still end up broke. Some people inherit land worth millions and still lose it. Some people are handed equipment, acres, opportunity, and family name, and they still cannot operate it. So the better question is not, how do I become a millionaire? The better question is, how do I keep from losing the $1 million legacy my family already built? And here is where I want families to pay attention. If you're the senior generation, you need to stop assuming the most entitled person is the right successor. The loudest child is not always the most capable. The one who stayed closest is not always the most responsible. The one with the same last name is not automatically the best fit. The one who wants control may not be the one who can manage it. You need to vet them. You need to give them a trial run. Let them manage a budget. Let them handle a crop plan. Sit in on meetings with the banker, with the landlord. Track repairs and be accountable for the debt that they're having to incur. Let them show you they can maintain equipment. Let them prove they can make decisions when things do not go their way. Because anyone can look good in a good year. You need to know what they do in a bad year. Do they blame everyone else? Do they hide bills? Do they overspend? Are they avoiding hard conversations and taking advantage of family? Do they treat equipment like it's disposable? Do they think land can always be sold to clean up their mess? That's not a successor. That's a huge liability. And if you hand a liability the keys to the operation, do not act shocked when they drive it straight into the ditch. Families also need a plan A and a plan B. Plan A might be, yes, our child is coming back to farm or ranch, and here is how they will earn into ownership. But plan B needs to be, what if they do not come back? What if they come back and cannot handle it? What if they get divorced, die, or become disabled? What if the siblings cannot get along? What if the operating child stops paying rent to the non-operating family members? What if the best operator is not family? What if the land needs to be leased out to preserve ownership and the legacy? What if cattle need to be sold, but the land can still be kept? What if the family name stays on the deed, even if the family is not running the day-to-day operation? These are not fun conversations, but they are absolutely necessary conversations. And I will tell you right now, the families who refuse to have the hard conversations while everyone is alive will usually have worse conversations after someone dies. By then, emotions are running high, paperwork is missing, expectations are completely different, resentment is loud, screaming, and the land becomes the bargaining chip. That is how legacy is lost, not because someone meant to destroy it, sometimes because nobody made a plan strong enough to protect it. Now, I know some of you do not like hearing this, and you're thinking, well, Heidi, hey, that sounds pretty dang harsh. Yeah, maybe it is. But selling great grandpa's land because someone could not budget is harsh. Losing a registered herd built over decades is harsh. Letting a family member farm rent-free for years while an elderly aunt struggles on fixed income is harsh. Watching grain rot in a field or get eaten by wildlife while a divorce battle drags on is harsh. Seeing 125 years of ranch history sold off because there was no plan B is harsh. I would rather have a hard conversation now than watch you and your family lose everything later. That is the whole point of Pathfinder Legacy. It is not just about who gets what. It is about whether what was built can survive the transfer. A legacy plan should not just answer who inherits. It should answer who's capable, who's accountable, who's been trained, who is financially disciplined, who has respect for the land and understands the operation, Who will protect the non-operating family members? Who will not sell the land the first time they get uncomfortable? Because here's the truth. You can lose a farm by selling too much land. You can lose a farm by giving control to the wrong successor. You can lose a farm by ignoring divorce risk. You can lose a farm by failing to train the next generation. You can lose a farm by letting family take advantage of family. You can lose a farm by pretending everything will be okay. It'll just work itself out. You can lose a farm by believing that love for the land is enough. It is not. Love for the land must be backed by a plan. So this Be a Millionaire Day. Maybe don't spend your time dreaming about what you would do with $1 million. Maybe spend your time asking whether your family is protecting the $1 million legacy already sitting beneath your boots. Ask yourself, who is actually capable of running this operation? Who is just entitled to it? Who has proven they can manage money? Who has proven they can handle responsibility? Who has shown respect for the land, equipment, livestock, landlords, and the family members who are counting on them? And most importantly, what happens if the person you thought would take over cannot or will not do it? Because there is not a genie in the world coming to save your legacy. There is only one planning, accountability, and the courage to tell the truth before it is too late. At the end of the day, a legacy is not lost in one bad year. It is lost when entitlement is handed the keys that accountability never earned. That is all for today's episode of Pathfinder Legacy. If this episode hit a little close to home, good, I'm glad. That probably means there's a conversation your family needs to have. Maybe it is about who is really capable of taking over. Maybe it is about whether the next generation has actually been trained. Maybe it is about land that should never be sold. And maybe it is about protecting the operation from divorce, debt, poor management, or family entitlement. Whatever it is, do not wait until the banker calls and the auction bill is printed or the land is already listed. Have that conversation now. Make plan A, make plan B. Vet your successor, protect the land. And remember, just because someone can inherit the operation does not mean they can operate it. Thanks for joining me on the Pathfinder Legacy podcast. If this episode made you think about your own farm's future, consider sharing it with a family member or a friend who could use the help. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones that matter the most. Until next time, I'll see you between the ditches.
Thanks for listening to the Pathfinder Legacy podcast, where your future is our focus. Be sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and visit us at pathfinderlegacy.com to start building your transition plan today.